Hey everybody, this is Marcel. Welcome back. It's good to see you. So for today I want to discuss something that occurred to me mostly while I was replying to comments on a previous video. Bear with me through a bit of an analogy here. See, I had claimed something positively scandalous and was getting a bit of a backlash from our community. Perfectly fine. I have a nice thick scaly skin. But amongst the legitimate criticisms was actually heaps of trolls. Now, the way I define a troll is someone who's intentionally there to waste your time. There's no way you'll ever sway their thoughts. There's nothing that you can argue with them about that they're ever going to agree with. They've got their mind set on a particular topic, but the point that they're there for is to cause you trouble, not to engage in the argument or the discussion. I respond to them in about the same sense that a person would respond to a mosquito bite. You know that it's there, it's irritating, it itches a little bit, but you move on. Occasionally, perhaps you'll swat them with a witty comeback, but for the most part, they're just a nuisance. Now, if any of you have ever gone camping on the edge of a lake midsummer, you'll probably agree that mosquitoes shouldn't be taken too lightly. You see, it's entirely possible to get swarmed by them at mass. In greater numbers, they've been known to drive creatures insane, even kill them. But of course, we're talking about mosquitoes here. Trolls are far less sophisticated. Nonetheless, something similar to this happened to me the other day. See, I will generally take my comment section very seriously, and I was going through comment after comment, answering questions about the video. I started noticing that about a quarter of them were getting repetitive, stuff that I'd already covered in the video itself, to the sum of practically telling me I was an idiot and then arguing my point for me, or even claiming that I had said things I had clearly not. After about 2 hours of answering comments, I looked down and realized that there was over 500 more waiting. Of course, most of them were not trolls, but how would I know that without reading them individually? Now, obviously, I'm not going to let something like a bunch of petty comments bring me down. In the end, to be honest, the more trolls I've stirred up, the closer I'm getting to the truth, or at least the most important topics. Besides all that, some of their comments are almost hilarious. I had one cheeky guy try and tell me that I needed to give an apology video for my opinion. Bit of a word to the wise, don't ever apologize for your opinion. If you learn something new, you can always go back and correct yourself, even make amends where necessary, but don't ever apologize. I don't typically put myself in situations where I'd be expected to anyway. I don't go after people, I go after ideas. And I will gladly run a bad idea straight into the dirt with no remorse, which as far as I'm concerned is fair game. So getting to my point with all of this, it had me sitting back thinking, what is it that makes a troll tick? What instigates this kind of behavior? I had a number of commenters actually say, because it was getting pretty rough in there, that, don't worry about it, Marcel, they're just a bunch of women. And it dawned on me, where else have I seen that kind of argumentative behavioral patterns? Where it doesn't matter what you say, you're gonna be wrong. They stubbornly anchor themselves to a point. Most of what they're claiming is emotional. Through shaming language and insults, they try and break you down. And the ultimate goal in the end of it is to wear you out, not to win the argument in the first place. So to those who suggested it, yes, I completely agree. Trolls are like women in the way that they argue, or maybe women are like trolls. Not to generalize here or anything, but there's a remarkable duality, isn't there? So I figure, what better opportunity than now to go through some of the behaviors that I've noticed, techniques that I've noticed that they use against people on their channels, or just people in general, coming from either women or trolls, and how we can recognize and possibly even avoid them. Now, one of the main things that I noticed recently is if a person were to virtue signal or even try to claim a higher ground within their comment, within their video, whatever platform they're expressing themselves on, by claiming that positive thing about themselves, their thoughts, their own behaviors, they are actually expressing a vulnerability. See, for them to have claimed it, by deduction implies that it is relevant and important to them. So all that a troll need do is claim that they are not that positive thing, or that they have violated their own words. For example, if someone took a genuine stance against racism, then all a troll need do is pick apart their videos or their comments to a point where they can claim even a completely unfounded claim that doesn't make sense, that that person had expressed some kind of racist tendency, well then they're of course going to mount a defense against that because it matters to them. It's like a guaranteed soft spot, and it really doesn't matter how powerful the person is that they're attacking or even how grounded they are in their resolve. It's all about wearing them down in their resources. I've seen the same thing from women. In past relationships, I have, for example, said that I didn't want to be like one of my relatives that was abusive towards women. It's part of the reason why I don't drink. I don't want to express those negative behaviors ever. Now, I've explained that to previous girlfriends, and usually in the context of them wanting me to drink and me explaining why I'm not going to. Well, later on in the relationship, when they're not getting something that they want or they're mad at me for some reason, they go straight towards accusing me of behaving like that relative, even though such an accusation would be completely out of context. The point is that they already knew that it was a vulnerability. It's a soft spot they can stab at, which then adjusted the argument to where it would distract me and waste my resources, my mental energy, if you will. Then you have situations where they anchor themselves to a point that they're trying to prove. Despite all solid arguments against whatever they're saying, they won't budge. Coming from trolls, this is no different than if you were to have one say, in my case, let's say they're claiming that I'm a beta. That's their argument. It does not matter what I say to claim otherwise. Their end goal likely has nothing to do with the fact that I'm a beta or not. Similar to previous examples, the point is to wear me out. I kind of think of this one as when a kid is asking their parent questions over and over again because they want a piece of candy. Can I have the piece of candy? No, you can't. Well, why not? Because you're going to have your dinner. Why do I have to have dinner? Because you need to eat. Why do I need to eat? The focus is the candy, or in the case of the troll, to cause the insult to stick. And they're going to keep bombarding the point in different directions until they eventually get the point across the way that they feel they want it to be. The parent knows that the kid's not going to stop asking questions until they get the piece of candy, so eventually they cave and just hand it over. Now, in some situations, a lot of times you can summarize it as just basically wanting to control the narrative, the tone of the conversation, or even the stance of the person that's been targeted by the troll. It's one of those situations where, from my perspective, if I were to agree with whatever they were saying, or disagree or argue, it really doesn't matter. If I were to completely agree with them on some particular point, they would just move on to another point and then attack that. In a sense, winning is either taking up my time or getting me to change from my original stance whatsoever. If this is sounding familiar, it's an awful lot like a shit test, or at least a number of trolling scenarios can be. If you consider that all it is a laid out situation where there is no correct answer, if the target behaves the way that they're supposed to, then it ultimately leads to an argument or heated discussion, something along that lines that ultimately ends to the benefit of the person causing it. If the target goes against the previously intended behavior, then that shows a fallacy on the target's point. In the previous example, if the person that's being accused of being racist, well, let's say in this scenario that they're actually not at all, and it's just an important topic to them, if they do not argue with someone who accuses them of being such, are they admitting it's true? Sitting back uninvolved, it may not be difficult to say, well, of course they're not, but in the heat of the moment, in that person's mind, when it matters so much to them, it's a bit of a different story. You know, the more I think about it, the tactics are very simple. There's not much strategy behind them. I mean, hell, children can and frequently do use them. Back when I was a kid talking to my mother, I wasn't ever rude to her or anything, but I was able to outsmart her. If I wanted a toy, for example, she would say that we didn't have the money for it. So I would go find something that was on sale, that was a really good deal, and that I could use for school or something. And I would slither over to her and be like, hey mom, how about this? Look at it, how good a deal it is. And so she would agree to buy that because it's such a good deal, and it was something that I'd used. And I look at her like, wait a second, this actually costs more than the toy. So I could save you a few dollars by just getting me that. See, I'd established already that what was important to her was saving the money, and then set up the scenario where getting what I want would save her money. If she still said no, that she couldn't afford it, I had already proven that she did in fact have the money for it, but it only said no because of what the item was and not because she lacked the funding. That only worked for a little while though, because my mom is pretty smart too. She caught on quick. The thing is that some of these child tactics are actually pretty effective in their simplicity. Then for the final example I want to share, there's the trolling technique of devaluing accomplishment. Nothing can break down a person's morale faster than hearing that something that they did that means a lot to them doesn't matter. From a troll's perspective, this could be something like a person making a video on breaking the record for skydiving speed. The troll says, well crap, I fall several times at work, don't hear anybody bragging about that. A person guesses the winning lottery numbers. Troll says, I got a busted watch that gets the numbers right twice a day, who gives a shit? Now it's possible that can come from jealousy, but there may not be any genuine emotion behind it at all. In the case of women, this behavior is more expressed to the sense of control. When a male has an interest outside of the relationship or specifically revolving around her, it distracts him from what could potentially be her resources, her attention time. Half the time, the thing that she's trying to break down is the very thing that interested her in him in the first place. She hooks up with the drummer in the band only to bring him home and complain that he plays music too much. Or a woman that hooks up with a guy that makes MGTOW content only to gripe that half his stuff is complaining about women. The end goal might be slightly different, but the tactics are virtually the same. Well, that's about all I have to say on this topic today. You tell me down below, did I miss anything? To all the little puppet account wielding trolls out there lurking in the internet, whom I'm assuming are mostly 12-year-old children, give your mother back her phone. Big people are talking. For the rest of you, if you enjoyed this topic, like, share, subscribe. This, of course, has been Marcel.